This week we'll be discussing the four dominant ethical theories. The two that I'll talk about are utilitarianism and feminist care ethics. Utilitarians believe that pleasure is the only thing that is intrinsically valued. They argue that everything we value it because it brings us pleasure. For instance, if I value a nice car, I value that car because when I drive it, it brings me pleasure. Or if somebody else compliments my nice car, that brings me pleasure. So that's why I put value on a nice car. They believe that our actions are judged on consequences, and the consequences being how much net pleasure we will get from these actions. There's two types of utilitarians: rule and act. Rule following utilitarians, they follow general rules that will give us the maximum amount of pleasure, such as don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, things like that. Act utilitarians have a process of evaluating consequences. They'll look at the options, they'll see what all could be possibly impacted or who all. They'll consider any likely outcomes from these actions, and then they'll calculate the net pleasure that's likely to be produced from these actions. And then they'll choose whichever option that is most likely to produce max pleasure. Feminist care ethics, they prioritize the interest of loved ones. They believe that we are fundamentally interdependent, and because of this, we should give priority to the closest people in our life, basically our inner circle, that those people should get priority over strangers. This is a philosophy for both men and women. The topic I'm going to discuss from their points of view is overpopulation. Overpopulation can be a problem because people will argue that the world only has a finite carrying capacity. Basically, that we can only sustain so many human beings on this planet before we run out of resources and before the planet starts to basically break down. Some of the causes of overpopulation are a decline in death rate, better health care, poverty, increased poverty in some areas, and poor contraceptive use. Some of the effects of overpopulation are lack of water and other resources, lower life expectancy, climate change, and some people believe ultimately extinction. Now we're going to talk about there's two types of theories of how we should deal with overpopulation. One being increased sex ed, increased push for contraceptive use, more education for women, those type of things. And I think we can all get behind that. But what I'm going to discuss is the more radical type solutions that some people push for. Those type things being government policies, similar to like the China's one-child policy. Some people claim that, or some people suggest that we should either take away money for big families or offer incentives to have smaller families. And some people will go as far as to say, let's offer incentives for sterilization. So utilitarian, I believe, out of all the ethics, they are the ones that are most likely to be able to justify some of these radical solutions that people argue that we need. They can do their utilitarian calculus and come up with possible scenarios where some sort of policy that argues for possible sterilization of people or only having small families, that would benefit mankind. And so they could possibly give up some of their rights for the betterment of mankind or for the greater good. However, feminist care ethics, I don't believe they would be against, or I believe they would be against any sort of policy that would infringe on their rights, or especially the rights of their families and friends. I believe they put the rights or the interest of their inner circle first, and especially over that of strangers. I do believe that they would be for less radical policies that I had mentioned earlier. However, I think that they would definitely be against any sort of radical policies, the more radical policies that people suggest that might be needed. Thank you.